information science to really prove without a reasonable doubt how interconnected we are, and on top of that, to disclose new technologies that are available to us or are going to become available to us using these frequencies, these equations, and information that have been held from us for so many years. So the next presenter is Dan Winner. And Dan, he draws on many sources, including science, mythology, popular culture, and even channeled information, looking for ideas about the deep connectedness of all things and how the profound nature of our oneness can be approached from architecture or art, math or biology, electronics, computers, or myth. With a powerful sense of this, he bridges between worlds. Dan has a talent for both poetry and a rigor in his language and twinkling eyes energy. Among his many projects, Dan is developing a new breakthrough theory on gravity. He believes recursive nesting in field geometries is what creates the implosion magnetic monopole, wind-centering force that we call gravity, and thus provides the clue on how to arrange magnetic long waves to repair gravity fabric and restore atmosphere retention. So I'm not going to go on because it gets pretty confusing. I can't really understand this entirely. So I would like to bring Dan on so he can explain it, give us a little bit of background on him, and go ahead and begin his presentation. Dan, I'm going to make you a presenter. And whenever you're ready, go ahead and unmute yourself and select your camera.
Great. I'm happy to be here, Neil. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
I'm just
it's all yours, brother. Thank you.
Switching on my camera. Nice to meet everybody. Happy to be here and happy to share. Can you see me okay? So this evening's presentation, well, it's evening here in France. This evening's presentation is along the theme of my new book, Fractal Spacetime, which is subtitled The Origin of Biologic Negentropy, which is to say the fractal origin of self-organization in wave systems in the universe. It's called fractal spacetime because we determined the specific frequency signature and geometry of fractality, which then we prove is the very nature of negentropy and centripetal force in space and time. Many people believe that space and time are fractal, but we've proven the actual specific wave dimensions starting with Planck. It is said that Einstein concluded that if he understood infinite non-destructive compression, he would clearly have understood gravity. He never did understand why an object falls to the ground, something that we now do, presumably because no one told him what a fractal was. And so we believe we now know what a fractal field is, and that is the title of the website for these projects, fractalfield.com. So without further ado, I'm going to show you some pictures that attempt to prove that. I'm clicking on Share Desktop now. And I'm going to turn off my face here. Let's see, and this is the picture we want to start with. Let's see, turning camera off. So you'll see a little bigger screen without my face there. So this is the key image right here. This is from the cover of my book. On the right, you see this red circle here, which is a graphic of the sphere of the length and time of the Planck length and time. And that's where we start. I mean, this is about the physics of the universe, and clearly we must start with Planck length and time. Planck length and time is a unit of length and time into which every wave physics has ever measured divides evenly. If you look closely, that picture actually is a symbol for the Tao. It's a sine wave inside a sphere. And other people have also determined, of course, that the Planck length is a universal resolution of the quantum foam. Another way of saying that is that whether there was a big bang or whether the universe is ultimately connected, one thing which is profound is that every wave we've ever measured from any end of the universe has always divided evenly into Planck length and time. So this is the grain structure of the quantum foam. Now, if you take Planck length and time and you multiply by exact integer exponents, which is, say, powers of golden mean ratio, you get a picture like this, which is, as you can see, a caduceus. Now, what is the physics for why we use the golden mean ratio here? The physics is that in another paper, which is fractalfield.com/mathematics of fusion, we proved that the golden mean ratio is the optimum solution to constructive wave interference and therefore conjugation or adding and multiplying of phases. Phase conjugation solution, constructive compression solution. The actual wave equations to prove golden mean ratio solves constructive wave interference is at that link, fractalfield.com/mathematics of fusion, which I published with 2 other mathematicians. This is specifically the solution to Einstein's dilemma about infinite non-destructive compression and is in fact the cause of gravity, which we're about to explain, why an object falls to the ground. Let me mention that when we multiply exact exponents, integer exponents of golden ratio times Planck length and time, we get almost every significant biological negentropic waveform. The wavelengths of photosynthesis, the wavelengths of hydrogen, the wavelengths of the Schumann resonance, the wavelengths of the brain waves during peak perception, the actual almost exact duration of the Earth year and Venus year. So all of these wavelengths put together comprise negentropy, self-organization, centripetal forces. That's why the title of the book is This is the Cause of All Centripetal Forces. Let's start with the most mysterious centripetal force of all, which is gravity. Here, maybe you can see this little arrow. I'm looking at this top-down view of pentagrams here. This is 10 golden mean spirals converging in the center, which is the top-down view we have proven of DNA and hydrogen. So my new equation here, again, that same equation, Planck length times multiples of golden mean ratio, for the first time accounted for the geometric explanation for why hydrogen exists. Now here's the same picture in red here on the right. This is, again, the top-down view of hydrogen. And R1, R2, and R3 are the 3 main radii of hydrogen. And I was the one to discover that the Planck length here in blue times exactly golden ratio to the 116, 17, and 18th power integer exponents of golden ratio, called phase conjugate, times Planck, produces this new equation for why the radii of hydrogen exists. This is the smoking gun that phase conjugation is the glue that's making hydrogen centripetal, namely the cause of gravity. So basically what I'm saying is golden mean ratio causes gravity. And there are others that have been close to say fractality causes gravity. Now we know specifically golden mean ratio is fractality. I want to use this picture here, these pentagrams, to explain why gravity exists and why golden mean ratio is the only way to make gravity. Here you see 2 sine waves converging to a point at golden mean ratio, and then here you see 2 more at golden ratio, etc., converging toward the center of this magical pentagram, repent and be saved. So what's happening here with the new information that not only is this pentagram the top-down view of DNA, every living protein, but also the top-down view of hydrogen, and ultimately we'll see the electron shells, which are platonic and use the dodecacosa, this same geometry. So why is every living thing pent, and why is hydrogen based on golden ratio? It's because that's the only way they make gravity and centripetal force. And that's what we want to explain by looking at these pictures of sine waves. When the waves converge in golden ratio and only in golden ratio, here are the wavelengths adding and multiplying recursively, constructively in golden ratio, something that only golden mean ratio allows because you can only recursively add and multiply. It's called arithmetic and geometric progression, a problem only golden ratio solves. That means that when these 2 waves converge at golden ratio, not only do their wavelengths add and multiply constructively, solution to constructive compression, solution to Einstein's mystery, but also their wave phase velocities recursively add and multiply constructively. Phase velocity add and multiply constructively only in golden ratio. That means that this form of compression, golden mean ratio only, allows a part of that energy of compression to be converted from rotation toward acceleration toward center. In other words, the phase velocities add and multiply constructively towards center, producing a phase velocity increase towards center of that charge. And that charge acceleration is named the gravity. I repeat, that charge acceleration caused only by golden ratio is named the gravity. It is the reason gravity exists, and I discovered that. And the proof of that, among other things, is the fact that now, because this theory predicts some very specific things, that what comes out the center of black holes, and Stephen Hawking should definitely be jealous here, but we now know what comes out the center of black holes, and that is light in phase velocities multiplied by golden ratio times c. And guess what? Raymond Chow very famously, in the papers up here, I think, here it is. The fact that faster than speed of light measurements do center very near 1.618 golden ratio times the speed of light confirms golden ratio phase conjugation causes gravity. And guess what? Raymond Chow's famous work, after many years of work, he said the phase velocities faster than light are found to be, quote, between 1.5 and 1.7 times the speed of light. Hint, 1.618 golden ratio. This is a beginning of a proof of my theory of the cause of gravity. Now, our actual propulsion technologies will make more use of this, and we'll talk more about that later. So, golden mean ratio, which is fractality optimized in 3D, is in fact the cause of gravity. That's the beginning of understanding why gravity is also negentropic and centripetal. Now, here, a wonderful other physicist, which I've been working with, and we're very appreciative. His name is Mark Rohrbaugh. Mark Rohrbaugh, and there's his website there, actually developed some equations where you can actually click on the link and use Google Calculator to calculate and confirm my hydrogen radii based on my new equation, which he calls elegant, which is great. Now, Mark Rohrbaugh did one other thing. He took my information and Nassim's information. Here's Mark right there, and the film is here. This website we're looking at for this conversation is fractalfield.com/conjugate gravity. So you can follow all these links. I'm explaining that website at the moment. And there's Mark Rohrbaugh. And this is Mark's new equation for the first time documenting a pure geometric relationship, and there's the link it goes to. He documented a pure geometric relationship between the mass of the proton and the mass of the electron. It's the first time the mass of the proton and the mass of the electron has been linked by pure, simple geometric ratio. But in order to do that, Mark also had to take the muonic proton radius from Nassim's work, which now is confirmed because it allowed the prediction of the proton mass to electron mass. So he said that his new equation confirms Nassim's work. He's the first one, remember, to actually plot a simple equation for the ratio of the geometry of the proton and the electron. Complete breakthrough in physics, complete powerful breakthrough. And he said that, so that his work is he says, quote, also proof of Dan Winter's phase conjugate work. And it says, he says here again, the blue underlined, phase conjugate solutions to Schrodinger's wave equations are what is produced. These solutions will be just like Dan Winter's phase conjugate solutions. So what about Nassim-Haramein? Well, because now Nassim's equation for the proton radius confirms the proton to electron mass, no one can argue with Nassim's equation for the proton radius, which is also called muonic, related to muonic hydrogen. So what did Nassim conclude? Here's Nassim-Haramein, who developed the equation for the proton radius. He began his work with a sphere of the radius of Planck length and time, the same way I did. And what does he conclude? He concludes, quote, the scaling law for all organized matter. And this is the frequency versus radius of the universe, the galaxy, the solar system, the atom, and the Big Bang, which is Planck. And if you put those variables all on a single line, frequency versus radius, what you get is golden ratio, golden ratio, golden ratio, and golden ratio. So he took an entirely different approach to showing that the scaling law for all organized is golden mean. I went further and proved that the golden mean ratio is the cause of gravity in hydrogen and the cause of gravity in general. So here's a graph of my equation. This is called a caduceus in mythology from Hermes, and this is a hermetic science. In physics, this is called phase conjugation. And indeed, here are the frequencies predicted. If you take Planck length and time times just exponents of golden ratio, you get these frequencies, 2.78 hertz, 4.5, 7.29, 11.8, 19 hertz. Now, it turns out that that's within a very close relationship to the actual frequencies of the Schumann resonance. And right here, Greg Braden, unfortunately, is very confused. These people who are talking about the Schumann resonance changing frequencies, frankly, are totally uninformed of the physics. I like Greg Braden, but sadly, out of touch. Anyway, these are the actual frequencies of the Schumann harmonics, 3 hertz, 7.83, 14.3, and 20.8. And look at that. They're very close to this harmonic cascade, which comes from the equation, which is on the cover of my book, Fractal Spacetime, Origin of Biologic Negentropy. So these are not only the frequencies of the Schumann harmonic cascade, called a pure phase conjugate negentropic collapse. That's the correct term. It's non-destructive collapse. Einstein absolutely knew was the cause of gravity and centripetal force, but he did not know the cause of non-destructive collapse. And that is the problem I have solved right here with this, my new equation. These are not only the frequencies of the Schumann resonance and the frequencies that we actually find, and that's our next slide. These are the actual frequencies you make in your brain waves when you have peak perception. In fact, that's the next conversation we're going to have. This is the cause of perception. But I just want to show a few more slides here. This is the actual only 2 frequencies that make photosynthesis happen. And guess what they are? Exact golden mean ratio times Planck length. Okay, so Planck length times golden mean to the 136 and 7 power exactly predict these 2 peaks, which are what makes photosynthesis happen. Notably, green is the opposite, which is why every living plant is green, because it spits out, because green is a non-conjugate frequency. That every plant is green. Conjugate means charge distribution efficiency, and obviously that's what green is not. That's why every living plant spits out the green photon, because it's charge that can't be distributed. Now, there's a lot more information about that here. I use the same equation to predict the Meyer wave and the 2 frequencies of heart rate variability, proving that the heart rate is actually using non-destructive collapse. The Meyer wave is very close to 0.1 hertz, and 0.0959 hertz actually is my equation. The Meyer wave, if any of you are familiar with heart rate variability work. Anyway, so what we're saying is this is the origin of living negentropy and centripetal forces. Now, I'd like to take this a little bit further into the psychological dimension. I wonder if we should entertain questions at this point, or if anybody has any burning thoughts about the physics before we go on to the kind of psychophysiology and science of perception here. I'm going to turn my face on a second. Have I gone too fast? I guess so. Right. So I will continue, given the fact that I don't see any questions. Here, I want to talk about the psychophysiological dimension of this, that this single wave equation accounts for all negentropy, all centripetal forces, every place the universe has ever emerged from chaos, including specifically gravity and hydrogen. And now I want to apply this to human condition, the cause of perception. Where we're going with this part of the conversation is to explain why, in physics, Bill Tiller was able to measure that focused human attention invariably caused electric fields to compress. So the question that's in front of us, basically the physics of psychokinesis. Remember, the physics of the universe has a lot to do with the role of mind. And here we're explaining the physics of mind, specifically in terms of why the human mind is able to have an effect on electric fields. And we're going to start with Bill Tiller's famous measurements. He measured about 6 different ways in the Stanford physics tradition. Bill Tiller's book, Conscious Acts of Creation. And he proved that focused human attention causes electric fields to compress. We also know 11 different times it was measured that when more than 1 million children sang the song at the same moment, the same song, that the solar flares were reduced measurably. The sun went, compression. So we're going to explain that physics. That's where we're going next. So now I'm going to turn off my face and turn back on full screen to the graphics. So we're talking about the nature of mind, the physics of psychokinesis here. That's the question on the table in terms of how the universe works, the physics of the universe. So again, here is that same equation, which is the cover of my book. Again, Planck length and time, exponent's golden ratio produces this caduceus, implosive cascade, phase conjugate, negentropic collapse wave. We proved that those frequencies were the frequencies of the Schumann harmonics, which is the Earth attempting to be negentropic, and we could fix it, because we could fix the Schumann harmonics of the Earth by repairing the grid and make the Earth more centripetal So now we know exactly the answer to James Lovelock's question in the book Gaia, which is, why is Earth self-organizing? We know why, because the Schumann harmonics of the planet are a negentropic phase conjugate pump wave, meaning we could fix the Schumann harmonics and restore gravity and negentropy. Hint, storms that emerge from chaos. If we understood the origin of negentropy, we can emerge from chaos. Otherwise, we're condemned to chaos. It's pretty simple. So the next thing we're going to apply this to is brainwaves. So this on the right here, this is an animation here of my invention called the Bliss Tuner. That's what this article is about. Now we've moved to a different web article. This is fractalfield.com/conjugate perception, the wave mechanics origin perception, otherwise known as the flame in the mind. And that's this famous lecture from Barcelona here. The film's online. So on the right, we have an animation of my invention, the Bliss Tuner, an EEG spectrum analyzer, which I invented after I was inspired by Professor Korotkov, who showed in his work in Russia that the people who were able to learn to see without their eyes, the World Without Blindness movement, and we have graphics on that below here, that the ones who succeeded in seeing without their eyes, the most effective way to measure their success was to measure when their brainwaves hit golden mean ratio. Also, the mind mirror people inadvertently discovered golden mean ratio as a solution to brainwaves, but they never even knew it. But that's another story. So the right and left side of this anime is the right and left hemisphere. The green is alpha, the purple is beta, and down below the yellow and red you have delta and theta. So the green is what you watch here. This is around 8 hertz, 8 to 9 hertz. The point is that the moment when this is a lady in Australia who's having a bliss experience. She leans her head back and she's going into bliss. And at a critical moment, she reaches 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 harmonics in her brainwaves, both right and left hemisphere, cross hemisphere coherence. And those 5 harmonics are in golden mean ratio. The golden mean is indicated here by the horizontal lines, right, left, which is where the computer computes exact golden mean ratio. The green's around 8 to 9 hertz, and then up in the purple when it hits golden mean ratio. Here it's about 14 to 16, yeah, 15, about 15 hertz there. So that's golden ratio, that point of alpha to beta golden ratio, and then that whole cascade correlates to the moment of bliss, peak perception. And look what that is. If you draw those lines from here over to here, do you see what those frequencies are? The alpha here is the Schumann 7.83. In fact, the alpha beta originally was invented by golden mean ratio between the centers of the alpha beta spectrum, but we see the brain actually hits golden ratio between alpha beta right here at the moment of bliss. And those frequencies are the equation from the cover of my book. In other words, the brain discovers phase conjugate implosive negentropic collapse, and that's called human bliss or peak perception because the brain is electrically imploding. And what does that do? That causes charge fields to compress. Hint, Bill Tiller, Conscious Acts of Creation. And we have the cover of his book down here, but we've learned something more, which I wanted to share with you also, is that the moment of peak perception bliss require one other aspect of the ratio between the right and left hemisphere, which we only learned recently, and I should thank Bill Donovan for this, actually. Now I'm going to another website called Conjugate Mind. Here's the animation on the top here. We're seeing what this flame in the mind does. Basically, the golden ratio allows this flame-like geometry to occur. And I think you see this animation a little slower than I do, but it's okay. There's only a few frames there. But you see what happens. That sine wave within a sine wave that started that looked like a flame is actually golden mean ratio sine waves embedded. And you see what it makes, the stellated nest of dodeca ecosa called the time star, which I did the first 3D animation. There it is. You see the flame there. I know there's some delay here. But what I want to show to you here is the animation we did, what happens in the brainwaves. First, I want to mention that this my theory that phase conjugation causes perception is not the first phase conjugate theory of perception. I work with another scientist named Steve Lehar here, and he has a model of the constructive aspect of visual perception he calls a phase conjugate model of perception. And in a minute, we're going to talk about why. But before we do, I want to show one other. Here's our another Dodecicos animation. We have so many movies, so little time. Here's the rotation of it. When I say phase conjugation is a caduceus cascade down a vortex cone, what I would ask that you visualize is this animation here. And I'm going to leave it on the screen long enough for you to see it. The visualization of how phase conjugation works is literally two pine cones that have learned to kiss noses. And that's what this animation is about. That's what happens in phase conjugate optics. That's what happens in your brain waves. It's another aspect of vortex theory, but specifically the two tornadoes learned to stand on their pinheads together. This is pine cones kissing noses, and that is the visual that you should think every time I say phase conjugation. Conjugation of phases, even in the sense of having conjugate relations in marriage. Now here's the next thing I'd like to explain in terms of phase conjugation, particularly in terms of brain waves. This is an animation of what in physics is called a transverse wave. Most electromagnetics travel like this. Now down below, this is an animation of what's called a longitudinal wave. Longitudinal waves are sometimes called a compressional wave. This is the way most sound waves travel. So most of the energy in sound waves are traveling like this, a longitudinal wave. You see, hopefully you're seeing a little bit of animation here. Whereas most of the energy of most electromagnetics fields travels like this, transverse. But when your brain makes this happen, these pine cones kissing noses thing, which is to say phase conjugates, what happens is the transverse wave is converted into a longitudinal wave, which is sometimes incorrectly called a scalar wave, which is an inappropriate term for physics because physics has other uses for the term scalar, namely vector quantified. So longitudinal is a more accurate term than scalar in most cases when you're speaking of psychokinetics. So the brain produces a longitudinal wave because when the brain makes this golden ratio harmonic cascade in phase conjugates, something else happens, which is something we newly learned. The right and left hemisphere need to be exactly 180 degrees out of phase. Why? Because that's the way pine cones have to kiss noses to phase conjugate. And you know how we know that works. Here is an animation of the right hemisphere is making a compressional wave, basically. This is also, if I were teaching you phase conjugation in an optics class at university, I would be telling you that it's called four-wave mixing. The lasers approach exactly in four opposite directions, and they phase conjugate because the pine cones kiss noses accurately, and that produces a longitudinal wave. And in physics, phase conjugate optics is well known for creating negentropy and time reversal. We're going to talk about time reversal in a moment. In my view, time reversal is primarily negentropy because you can't time reverse back to disorder, only order. For example, you can time reverse rusted steel back to unrusted, but not the reverse. You cannot time reverse to disorder. Therefore, in my view, time reversal is always negentropic. But back to what I was saying about brainwaves. I'm going to turn my face on for a second here. Maybe I'm all the pictures now. I'm going to stop the screen sharing. Turn the camera. Maybe my smiling face will be less boring at the moment. Oh, I see there might be some questions here. Oh, good. Okay. So what I wanted to tell a story about was Ingo Swann, who did some of the work with Oscar Estebany in restoring damaged trypsin enzymes with hands-on healing. It was wonderful work. But Ingo Swann, who very famously came back from remote viewing the dark side of the moon and said the bad guys live there. I think we should take that seriously, by the way. But Ingo Swann was famous for something else, and that was that he was measured in the lab replicably heating a thermistor, a temperature sensor, at a distance with his mind. He did it multiple times. So he could produce heat at a distance with his mind. Now, if you know something about the physics, this is called conjugate interferometry, and we'll get there. This is the holy grail of plasma fusion. It's a, heat control at a distance. This is like fusion research, the holy grail. So what Ingo Swann did was here's a thermistor at a distance, and now they put it inside a Faraday cage, and he still was able to make it heat with his mind at a distance inside a Faraday cage. Well, according to physics, the only way he could do that would be by sending a longitudinal wave there, which is both superluminal, can be faster than light, and will go through about anything. Say, for example, the steel container in which you're trying to make plasma fusion work. Hint, you don't need to waste enough money to feed Africa every year by trying to make fusion work if you know how to do interferometry, because the whole question is, of course, interferometry and plasma containment. So we are pretty sure that when Ingo Swann heated that temperature sensor at a distance through a Faraday cage, that he was making longitudinal waves with his mind. And I have measured for many years that when people cause compression, peak perception with their mind, they make golden ratio. But I had never up to that point checked that, in fact, at those moments of psychokinesis, the right and left hemisphere have to be 180 degrees out of phase in order for the two pine cones to get noses properly, called phase conjugate, and make a longitudinal, compressional, superluminal, psychokinetic flame in the mind. You get the flavor. So this is a beautiful way to test my new theory of the reason perception exists. Hello. I have been measuring golden ratio in brainwaves for 20 years, but I have not yet proven by measurement that the right-left hemisphere must in fact be 180 degrees out of phase, but I now believe absolutely that's true. And I'm so sure it's true, I don't even need measurement, but you're welcome to, because I have made use of this idea for a technology which we believe is, among other things, the ultimate cancer cure and rejuvenator, and stem cell switch, and Kundalini trigger, and shamanic stargate, and a few other things. It's the old story. Don't bother to publish anything in the physics literature because they're boring. No, what you do is you invent something that makes money, and then universities and governments say, oh, maybe we better pay attention. That's the fun part. And that's where we're going with this. Is obviously, we have teams in many countries working on these things. And in fact, we're quite clear that we can make a bioactive field. And that's the next subject of this conversation. Just to see if anybody had any specific questions here. I guess we're okay. I'm now going to go to the website, bioactivefield.com. I'm turning on the desktop, and I'm switching off my face. Camera off. And then I'm going to the website, bioactivefield.com. So the point I want to make with bioactive field technologies, which is one of the lead technologies in Implosion Group, is that once you understand the origin of negentropy and centripetal forces, that you can use this to make healing fields and basically save civilization. This was part of the story, that what Hermes was about when he made the dolmen and the Stonehenge and the hypogeum, that he was about creating an electric field that could save civilization. What he meant by this was, let me even turn my face on just a little bit here so you can see that too. What Hermes meant was that archaeologists modern, New England Antiquities Research Association as an example, have proven that most of the stone dolmen structures were absolutely proven to be not a place to live, not a place to store food. No, it was something else. And that something else was a charge field in which to save civilization. That's what dolmen are for. That's called a bioactive field. Now, the ancient term for this was, I will raise a Shem unto the Lord. Shem means, well, it was mistranslated in the Bible to mean it's the altar in the church. So when in the Bible they say Shem, they translate to the altar in the church. What they don't know is the altar in the church is actually defined as a bioactive field generator. That means something entirely different than what the religious interpretation, which is sad because the physics is more important than the religious tradition here. So raising a Shem unto the Lord meant I would make a life force rejuvenation field. Now, what Shem actually means is CH, Shaman. CH is the Hebrew word for chet, which means a vortex, a deep vortex in your throat, or quite literally, chem, means access to a black hole. Now, when Zecharia Sitchin studied the word Shem for many years, he decided to call it a Highward Firestone. He was close in his language, but if he had known the correct physics, he would have called it an implosive capacitor. So a Shem, raising a Shem unto the Lord, is in fact an implosive capacitor. And if you know how to make an implosive capacitor, then you can save civilization, because bioactivefield.com. Because not only do a few minutes treatment of seeds in that chamber cause a measurable increase in growth, 30 to 50% in that seed. In other words, you could save agriculture. This was proven in the book Seeds of Knowledge, Burke and Levengood. And Levengood subsequently did some beautiful laboratory studies, proved that correct pulse treatment of seeds could produce 30 to 50% increase in growth every time, and Levengood's lab is still active. And our friend Nancy Talbot's involved. It's good work. But we believe we have the next step in that regard, and that's where I'm going here, therify.net. But not only could you save civilization if you could make this access to a black hole, which is what a Shem is. I will raise a Shem unto the Lord. In other words, I'll make a capacitive wormhole that makes a little black hole, and that will be a bioactivefield.com. And that's what the bioactive field technologies are about. Here's the website. And we show examples of the growth, and we show the changes in the capacitance here. This is some pictures of the seed growth from Seeds of Knowledge, and this is too big to go through right now. Here is the GDV measure of the water treatment. So the water treatment that's implied here is called theimploder.com, and the imploder.com is centered on it's one of the bioactive field technologies shown here at bioactivefield.com. And I'm going to go to an animation called Imploder Magnetic Research, because I just want to show you one little part of theimploder.com, and that's this. See this? I don't know if you can see this nozzle animating here, but I took my equation for the radii of hydrogen, and I designed a 3D nozzle vortex called the ideal implosive negentropic implosive hydrodynamic vortex. We call it Schauberger stream. And that is the centerpiece of the imploder.com. Down the perfect path of phase conjugate collapse, there you create a active field. In fact, the imploder nozzle here, and this is what the imploder vortex looks like. That nozzle, if the water is even a little bit conductive, makes a capacitive field such that even if you don't get the water, the seeds that grow near that nozzle grow faster because of the capacitance field implosive around the nozzle. Basically, any centripetal field increases growth because a seed's ability to be alive or dead determines whether it can suck in the first nutrient. In other words, implode or die, or get fractal or get dead. So that's an introduction to the imploder.com. We have a very commercially successful agricultural water treatment. It uses a centripetal implosive magnetic adjacent to that implosive vortex, and we produce the world's most powerful and most documented magnetic water treatment for growth. It's also incredibly helpful for humans. The physics is that when the water molecule emerges from the vortex nozzle, remember that molecule is now spinning centripetally and dipolar capacitively charged, and then it enters super dense 4,500 Gauss centripetal opposing magnetics. It's like a rotor in a per-mag motor, and what that does is it concentrates the spin density, concentrates the spinning top. Spin density up, molecular cluster size way down, dramatic increase in exposure of surface, of course, molecular cluster size down, and dramatic increase in solubility and therefore hydration. Not only is hydration the issue in plants, of course, for growth, accelerating growth, 30% is very common, 60% in hemp. And also, by the way, the super imploder there with the magnetics reduces the power required for hydrolysis in water pre-treatment 20%, proven in Chile and Canada. So that's basically spin density and solubility. And then you can imagine how many diseases are related to hydration. Almost, half, 2/3 of all diseases are related to inability to hydrate, including especially sports. And so the hydration solution is very healthy for humans. And now we're applying that to the spa industry, imploderspa.com, and that's just coming out. And we have incredible healing documents that's being launched from Belgium very soon. So bioactivefield.com. Now, we don't have time for all of this, but we have a whole curriculum on defining architecture this way. goldenmean.info says architecture, which is the world's most developed curriculum on biologic architecture, practiced actively all around the world, with a huge following in Spanish on this, major activity in Brazil and in Mexico on this, psychogeometria.com. The best curriculum on the planet for biologic architecture. 3 different ways to measure life force in a building, making it easy that your contract with your architect is simple. When he's done, 3 different ways to measure, determine if the electric field created by that building will cause a seed to grow. Then you know if that architect's going to get a paycheck. It's very simple. It's living architecture. So obviously, if he fills the building with electric smog and steel and aluminum, the seed's not going to grow. And by the way, children aren't going to grow either. And so the architect should not get a paycheck. The physics is because the steel and aluminum have a capacitance opposite to harmonic inclusiveness, therefore opposite to charge distribution efficiency, therefore opposite to life, which means you should run, not walk, to get the steel and aluminum out of your house, kitchen, and bedroom first, because your aura is shorted out by that material, cannot breathe. Charge distribution efficiency is life. So the way the electrical engineers define this is called high dielectric constant. Maybe let's take a minute on that. The dielectric between the plates of a capacitor determines how efficiently it rings with like a bell. You use a voltage like a hammer to hit the capacitor, and you determine how efficiently that rings. A high dielectric means that bell can ring forever. And if the dielectric constant is high enough, that means that capacitor is going to ring with more energy than the hammer, the voltage, you hit it with. And that means a high dielectric constant in a capacitor equals a 0-point energy device. Vacuum coherence. An example is a pine cone getting about 2 to 12 millivolts from gravity, the same way a chicken egg does. And that voltage that the pine cone and chicken egg extract from gravity is called life. And it's done by being an implosive capacitor. They're little black holes, pine cones, chicken eggs. You can see a dozen ways we've measured that, goldenmean.info/biophoton. So high dielectric constant is priceless for what's in your house, living materials, and what you wear, your clothes. If you wear polyester clothing, the bad dielectric means your capacitance bleeds charge, and that means your aura dies. Well, it gets weakened. Whereas the correct high dielectric material, unbleached hemp is ideal, but at least living material. The reason that every molecule that ever wanted to join the exclusive club called life has learned about my bumper sticker, which is get fractal or get dead. So if a molecule is passing by this attractive club called life and wants in, the molecule has to rearrange its components to get fractal or get dead. And what that means is the dodecasymmetry of clathrates in water, the dodecasymmetry of fullerenes, the dodecapent symmetry of every living protein. What that means is that protein and that molecule that joined the club of life has embedded itself in charge distribution efficiency, which is capacitive efficiency, which is high dielectric constant. So high dielectric constant is a way of finding out if this material wants to be around your body, your clothes, or your house, because your aura can breathe through it. Translation? Steiner says, oh, the kids should never touch synthetic plastic, steel, or metal. No, the children in the Steiner school must only touch living material, living fabric, stone, living wood, because this could allow their aura to unpack. And anything that builds your aura moves you toward sustainability, called immortality. Anything that doesn't feed your aura moves you toward death. This is why Celestine prophecy says all human interactions about charge, because you decide who you kiss and where you live and what you eat, simply based on whether it will allow your body to gain capacitance. Living capacitance, that geometry of plasma is called Chi, Orgone, Baraka, Shakti, Pat, spirit. But in physics, it's called living plasma. And living plasma is intelligent in the sense of Allison barium titanate land, the name of the paper on high dielectric phase conjugates, which is basically that these fields tend to find each other at a distance. It's why you can call the aura of the mountain if you have pure intention, because da 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 da. So before we finish, I wanted to talk about Therify.net. This is the most powerful of our rejuvenation plasma field technologies, resulting directly from this equation on the cover of my book. So here I'm clicking on Therify.net, which is a picture of our Priori-inspired plasma healing field technology. Now, this is what some of the electronics looks like, and this is what the plasma tubes look like. The famous scientist in France called Priori, Antoine Priori, who invented a plasma device which healed hundreds, if not thousands, of cases of cancer and many other diseases proven by the French government. Sadly, it all died because nobody could figure out how it worked. Well, I did. Specifically, the equation on the cover of my book predicted the low frequencies he used, so I knew immediately the principle. It was a phase conjugate negentropic pump wave. The trick is, if you make that phase conjugate negentropic pump wave broad spectral by using the correct recipe of noble gases, which are called phase conjugators, and in direct phase lock with the right phase relationship, you make plasma tube implosion pairs which look like this. This is our Priori device. This is what the plasma tube looked like when it's on fire. It's a cool flame. Hint: the flame in the mind, the cool flame, the fire the flame that does not consume. That should be familiar. And the arc between them is broad spectral phase conjugation. This is what in ancient times was called Dharana or Stargate. It's a plasma accelerator. It's a stem cell switch. It's a shamanic wormhole. It is a Kundalini trigger, and it is rejuvenation. In a sense, it's time reversal. We've already, within 3 minutes, healed major cysts. We've had excellent results on melanoma. We believe we're installing now. Remember, this device is coming from 3 to 6 countries at once right now, and we're installing in 3 countries right now. So no country can stop this. Sorry, this is unstoppable. And what's going to happen is that the strongly centripetal field, let's start with the physics of the reason it heals cancer. I'm going to turn off my face so this graphic is a little bit bigger now. So I hope you can see this graphic. It's entitled A New Lesson in the Cell Biophysics of Cancer from Dan Winter, Therify.net. Cell metabolism consists of a phase conjugate by wavelength, caduceus series of massaged wavelengths from long wave, inputs, protein, food, to very short wave, high info density outputs. This shortwave, high quality ultraviolet light drives cell metabolism. This is cell biophysics 101. The cell is in the business of making high quality ultraviolet light, and this is the motor of cell metabolism. When the cell gets enough of this bliss juice, the sex juice of the cell, this UV coherence, it's a UV plasma field. When this accretes in the cell, this is what switches on DNA replication. This is the secret of cancer. So this is called an inverse volcano of cell metabolism, caduceus frequency stairway. So here's the graph. Incoming on this caduceus, you have the protein and food coming into the cell, relatively long chain molecules. Now, through the cellular organelles, this is stair-stepped in specific golden ratio phase conjugate collapse wave exponents to shorter waves, DNA precursor, high quality UV light, and genetic material itself. And we have proven, and this is the point I want to make, and this is explained here, we have proved all of these wavelength steps from hydrogen to DNA golden ratio to ADP. I'm going to show you that slide in a minute. Adenosine diphosphate, adenosine triphosphate, ATP, is a universal dollar bill energy currency of all cellular metabolism. And guess what the ADP frequency is? Yes, golden ratio phase conjugate. and photosynthesis. All of these wavelengths in this stairway are exact phase conjugate implosive negentropic collapse. Each of those wavelengths perfectly fits multiples of Dan Winter's equation, Planck times phi, golden ratio to the n. So this is the way cell metabolism works. You take the long wave, you get down to the short wave, and you're down to the short wave, the volcano spits out blue fire, sex Jews, and if there ain't no place for that to go, oops, DNA replication, promiscuity. It's just like a kid. If you give a kid art and music and dance and creativity, they don't have to have kids too prematurely. But if there's no output for their creative sex juice, oops, you have promiscuity. Well, the same is true for the cell. The proof of that is when cells become spherical, you know it's cancer because that more contains the ultraviolet, preventing plasma projection. It's well known in biophysics that the more spherical the cell, the more cancer it is. Surfactants, wet making, and permission to touch are the opposite of cancer. Listen, this is the critical point. Cancer is defined as when touch no longer inhibits replication. It's called contact inhibition. It's the only real definition of cancer. If the touch between cells do not inhibit replication, that's called cancer. Well, guess what happens when you touch? If the cell membrane is soft, which is to say not spherical, then ultraviolet can pass. If the cell membrane is hard and more spherical, the ultraviolet doesn't pass and bounces back to center, triggering replication, cancer. So this is a new way to define the physics of cancer, where the creation of the high-quality ultraviolet light and its distribution determine the cancer switch, just the same way the Therify is a stem cell switch. So Therify.net works because perfected broad-spectral phase conjugation drives this cascade toward completion, providing an implosive way out for the ultraviolet coherent sex juice of the cell. In other words, implosion as charge distribution efficiency is the opposite of cancer. Charge distribution efficiency is the opposite of cancer because if the cell is social, distributing its charge, its creative juices, then it doesn't have to focus the blue fire into promiscuity. This is documented also in Albert Szent-György's Nobel-winning work titled Electronic Biology in Cancer. I'm going to pause the screen sharing, turn back on the camera. In Electronic Biology and Cancer, Albert Szent-Györgyi showed that the presence of the triplet state electron, which is a well-distributed electron, which means highly ordered water in the cell, which means water inside the cell more orderly than water inside the cell more orderly than ice, then charge distribution was efficient and cancer goes away. So the super orderly water called a triplet state electron. A triplet state electron is like extended family when Jesus is in the wagon train, and there's so many aunts and uncles, the kid is safe in a big family. It's a well-distributed child, a healthy child. It takes a village to raise a child. For the water, that village is very disciplined, ordered water molecule bonds, more orderly than ice, inside the living cell that allows charge distribution efficiency and ends cancer. Similar to the only reason a pine needle turns brown in acid rain is because there's no trace mineral to make the water orderly. So do we have questions at this point? I've carried on a great deal.
Hi, Dan. Just to let you know, we have like 1 to 2 minutes. If you want to wrap it up, take one last question.
Okay. Remember, the point we're making here is that when you understand the origin of all biologic negentropy and negentropy in physics in general, you can repair that negentropy, return to self-organization, and restore centripetal forces. My book on this, Fractal Spacetime, is on top at fractalfield.com. And I encourage you to look at the core physics of why fractal spacetime is the solution to self-organization. Happy to answer questions also in email and chat. My personal email, danwinter@fractalfield.com. Oh, the question was about Jesus and the wagon train. The idea was that the extended family makes it safe for a child to be among many cousins and gather information from broad horizons. And this is the metaphor about a water molecule that can, about an electron shell called the triplet state electron that can be so distributed among many hundreds of molecules. That perfected distribution is fractal, and that's the solution. So I want to thank you all for attending here and invite you to communicate. Our blog is facebook.com/fractalfield. Yes, a vector equilibrium is similar to the cellular dodecacosa, exactly. In fact, a vector equilibrium where Bucky Fuller showed the jitterbug stellates cube octa to ecosa dodeca is the mechanism of superconductivity, exactly. I see BJ White there, that's great, old friends.
Well, thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you, nice to be with you.
We'd like to have you back. I think maybe if you're up for it, we can do an intensive or a longer workshop in the future where you have more time to really go into depth about everything.
Great. Well, that sounds interesting. Let's talk about it. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. You have a great night.
Thank you. Blessings. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you. Bye-bye. You can go ahead and switch off your screen share. Beautiful. That was amazing. Thank you so much again, Dan. So we were going to take a 30-minute break because we were supposed to end 20 minutes ago. But what we'll do is, if it's okay with everybody in the room, let me know. We'll take just 10 minutes. You guys can grab something to eat or whatever you need to do. And if 10 minutes is okay with you, we'll go ahead and get started at 12:30. Otherwise, we can take the full 30. Let me know in the chat room. Okay, so we'll just take 10 minutes.